A family in Ohio spent $400,000 on their dream home, moved in within 3 weeks, and within 6 months, the walls were cracking apart, while black mold crept silently behind the drywall. Nobody saw it coming. Not the buyers, not the real estate agent, not even the first inspector who walked through with a flashlight and a clipboard and somehow missed everything that mattered. If you're a homeowner, a buyer, or someone who just wants to know what's hiding behind the walls of the house you're about to sign for, subscribe now, because every week we dig into the real construction failures that inspectors catch, the ones they miss, and the hidden disasters that cost regular people their life savings. Every year, thousands of homes across the United States fail inspection, and most buyers never understand why. They see a report full of confusing check marks and technical language, and they move on, assuming it's minor. But some of these failures are anything but minor. Some of them are warning signs of disasters that haven't happened yet. Silent problems that are already growing behind the walls, under the floors, and beneath the foundation, waiting for the worst possible moment to reveal themselves. Today, we're breaking down the 10 most common reasons homes fail inspection. And by the end, you'll never look at a house the same way again. Let's start with the one that terrifies buyers more than any other, because it's the one you can't just patch and forget. Picture a beautiful 2-story home, fresh paint, manicured lawn, the kind of house that looks perfect in photos. But underneath, in the dark, unfinished basement, there's a crack running along the foundation wall, thin as a pencil line. Most buyers walk right past it. It doesn't look dangerous. It doesn't look expensive. But here's where everything changes. That thin crack isn't just cosmetic. It's a signal. Foundations move when the soil underneath them moves, and soil moves when water gets where it shouldn't. Over months and years, that hairline crack can widen, letting moisture seep through, weakening the concrete from the inside out. What looks like nothing today can become a structural nightmare in 5 years. Doors that won't close, floors that slope, walls that visibly separate from ceilings. Inspectors are trained to notice the difference between a harmless, settling crack and one that signals real structural movement. They look at the width, the direction, whether it's stepped or straight, whether there's evidence of water staining nearby. A professional structural engineer might get called in to measure it precisely, sometimes returning months later to see if it's grown. Because this is one of those hidden details that changes everything about a property's value. The fix, when caught early, is often manageable. Excavation, waterproofing, carbon fiber reinforcement strips bonded directly to the concrete wall, engineered to hold it in place before it moves further. It's not cheap, but it's far less devastating than what happens if that crack is ignored for another decade. That's the difference between a professional repair and a homeowner who just paints over the problem and hopes for the best. But foundations aren't the only thing hiding trouble. Let's go up, all the way to the roof. Because what happens above your head can be just as dangerous as what happens beneath your feet. At first glance, a roof might look fine from the street. Shingles in place, no obvious holes, nothing dramatic. Most homeowners never notice this, but roofs fail in ways that are almost invisible from the ground. An inspector climbing onto that roof might find shingles that are curling at the edges, granules worn away, flashing around the chimney that's pulled loose just enough to let water trickle in during heavy rain. It doesn't take a hurricane. It just takes months of small leaks, dripping quietly into the attic insulation, soaking wood framing that nobody sees until the ceiling below starts to sag or discolor. This is where the real danger begins. Water doesn't just damage what it touches. It creates the perfect environment for something far worse: mold. Dark, hidden colonies growing in insulation and wood, releasing spores into the air the family breathes every single day. By the time anyone notices a musty smell or unexplained allergies, The damage has often been spreading for months. Professional roofers know that a proper inspection isn't just a glance from the driveway. It means checking flashing seals, examining the attic from the inside for water stains and daylight coming through where it shouldn't, and testing for soft spots in the decking that indicate rot underneath. The right fix might mean simply resealing flashing and replacing a few shingles. The wrong approach, waiting until there's an actual leak dripping onto furniture, means tearing out ceiling drywall, replacing rotted framing, and remediating mold that's already spread into the walls. Now here's the part that surprises even experienced home buyers. Roofs and foundations get all the attention, but there's a problem happening at ground level, quietly, for years, that inspectors flag constantly, and almost nobody thinks about it until it's too late. It's the way water moves around the house. Every home is supposed to be built with what's called proper grading, meaning the ground slopes gently away from the foundation, so rainwater runs off into the yard instead of pooling against the walls. It sounds simple. It sounds like something no builder would ever get wrong. And yet, it's one of the most common reasons homes fail inspection across the entire country. Picture heavy rain falling on a home where the yard actually slopes toward the house instead of away from it. Water collects right at the foundation, soaking into the soil, pressing against the concrete walls day after day. This is called hydrostatic pressure, and it's a silent, relentless force. Over time, it pushes moisture through even solid concrete, causing the exact kind of foundation cracking we talked about earlier. It's connected. Almost every major structural problem in a home traces back to water that had nowhere else to go. The professional solution often looks unglamorous but works wonders, regrading the soil around the foundation, installing gutters and downspouts that carry water several feet away from the house, sometimes adding a French drain system underground to intercept water before it ever reaches the foundation walls. It's inexpensive prevention compared to the alternative, which is thousands of dollars in structural repair after the damage is already done. But drainage problems don't just threaten foundations. They threaten something buyers almost never think to check. And this is where the story takes a darker turn. Beneath many homes across the country sits a crawl space, a shallow, cramped area between the ground and the first floor. Most homeowners have never even been down there. It's dark, it's uncomfortable, and it's easy to forget entirely. But inspectors know that crawl spaces tell the truth about a home's hidden health. When water and poor ventilation combine in a crawl space, the results are almost always the same. Standing moisture, wood floor joists turning soft and dark with rot, insulation sagging and soaked, and the unmistakable smell of decay drifting up into the living space above without anyone realizing where it's coming from. In severe cases, structural support beams weaken so much that floors above begin to feel spongy underfoot, a warning sign most families dismiss as simply an old house settling. This is exactly the kind of hidden detail that changes everything once discovered during an inspection. What looked like a move-in ready home suddenly requires vapor barriers, dehumidification systems, and, in serious cases, structural sistering, where new lumber is bolted alongside rotted joists to restore their strength. Professional crawl space encapsulation involves sealing the entire area from ground moisture with heavy plastic sheeting and controlling humidity so wood framing stays dry for decades. Skipping this step is one of the cheapest shortcuts a builder can take, and one of the most expensive mistakes a homeowner can inherit. Now let's move to a danger you can't see at all, one that doesn't show up as a stain or a crack, but can be lethal if ignored. Electrical systems. An inspector opening an electrical panel isn't just checking if the lights turn on. They're looking for outdated wiring types that were once common, but are now known fire hazards, overloaded circuits where too many appliances draw more power than the wires were ever designed to handle. and amateur wiring jobs where a homeowner or unlicensed handyman made a repair years ago that technically works, but violates basic safety principles. Here's what makes this so unsettling. A home can look completely normal. Lights function, outlets work, nothing seems wrong, while the wiring behind the walls is a slow-motion fire risk. Loose connections generate heat over time. Overloaded circuits stress wiring insulation until it becomes brittle and cracks. None of this is visible during a casual walkthrough. It only becomes obvious to someone trained to test voltage, check panel capacity, and recognize outdated components at a glance. The professional fix usually means a licensed electrician upgrading the panel to handle modern electrical loads, replacing dangerous wiring, and correcting any code violations discovered along the way. It's not the most visually dramatic repair on this list, but it might be the most important, because unlike a leaky roof that takes months to cause damage, faulty wiring can cause a fire in minutes. And speaking of things hiding behind walls that most people never think about, let's talk about plumbing, because what starts as a small drip can quietly become one of the most expensive discoveries in the entire inspection process. Imagine an inspector running water through every faucet in the house, flushing every toilet, checking under every sink. Most of the time, everything looks fine on the surface, but then they check the water pressure, and it's oddly low throughout the entire house. That's often the first clue of something happening out of sight. Aging pipes corroding from the inside, mineral buildup restricting flow, or worse, a slow, hidden leak somewhere inside a wall or under the slab foundation. This is where the consequences start stacking up. A slow leak inside a wall doesn't announce itself with a flood. Instead, it seeps quietly for months, sometimes years, softening drywall, warping flooring, and creating the exact damp environment mold needs to thrive. By the time a homeowner notices a musty smell or discolored ceiling, professional plumbers often find extensive damage that started from something as small as a single loose pipe joint. Older homes carry another risk entirely. Outdated pipe materials that were standard decades ago, but are now known to corrode, contaminate water quality, or fail unexpectedly. Replacing an entire home's plumbing system, called repiping, is invasive and costly, but it's far less costly than dealing with a burst pipe flooding an entire finished basement overnight. Now here's a mistake that seems harmless at first glance, but has ended up costing homeowners more than almost anything else on this list, because it doesn't just affect safety, it affects whether they're even allowed to keep the renovation they paid for. Unpermitted work. Picture a beautifully finished basement, a stylish new deck, or an updated kitchen with a bumped-out wall to create an open floor plan. It looks incredible in photos, but during inspection, something doesn't add up. The structural support for that new opening looks improvised. There's no documentation showing a permit was ever pulled, or that the work was reviewed by local building authorities. This is one of those hidden details that shocks buyers the most, because it doesn't just mean redoing paperwork. Unpermitted structural changes often mean the work was never verified for safety at all. A wall removed without proper support beams installed can compromise the structural integrity of the entire floor above it. What looks like a stylish, open-concept renovation might actually be a home slowly sagging under weight it was never engineered to hold. The professional solution involves bringing in a structural engineer to assess whether the change was done safely, retroactively pulling permits, and in serious cases, physically reinforcing the area with proper support beams that should have been there from the beginning. For sellers, this can delay or even collapse a sale entirely. For buyers, it's a warning that other corners might have been cut too, corners that are far less visible than an open kitchen wall. At this point, you might think we've covered the biggest dangers, but there's one more hidden inside nearly every American home: and it's one that most people never even consider until an inspector points it out. Ventilation, or more specifically, the lack of it. Bathrooms without proper exhaust fans, attics without adequate airflow, and kitchens where moisture from cooking has nowhere to escape, all create the same slow, invisible problem: trapped humidity. And trapped humidity inside a home is essentially an invitation for mold and wood rot to move in and stay. An inspector checking attic ventilation might find insulation that's damp and matted down, wood sheathing showing dark discoloration, or condensation forming on nails poking through the roof deck, tiny drops of water collecting exactly where they shouldn't be. In bathrooms, the telltale sign is peeling paint near the ceiling, or a soft, spongy feeling in the drywall around the shower area. Evidence that moisture has been settling there for a long time with nowhere to go. The professional correction typically involves installing proper exhaust systems that vent outside rather than into the attic, adding ridge and soffit vents to allow continuous airflow, and sometimes upgrading insulation that's already been compromised by trapped moisture. It's one of the least expensive problems on this list to prevent, and one of the most expensive to ignore, because once mold establishes itself inside wall cavities, remediation means cutting out contaminated material entirely. Now let's talk about something buyers almost never think to inspect themselves, because it's not glamorous, it's not visible, and it's easy to assume it's just working fine. Heating and cooling systems. An HVAC system nearing the end of its lifespan doesn't always announce itself with obvious failure. Instead, inspectors often find warning signs: rust forming around the unit, uneven temperatures between rooms, ductwork that's disconnected or crushed somewhere in the crawl space, quietly leaking conditioned air into places nobody lives. The system technically runs, but it's working harder than it should, burning more energy, and slowly approaching a breakdown that could leave a family without heat in the middle of winter, or air conditioning during a brutal summer heat wave. This is where the story often takes an unexpected turn for buyers who assumed a home inspection was just about the big, visible stuff. A failing HVAC system isn't cheap to replace, and it's exactly the kind of expense that can turn a dream home into a financial burden within the first year of ownership. The professional approach involves servicing what can be saved, sealing and repairing ductwork, and being honest about when a system has simply reached the end of its usable life. It's not the most dramatic reveal on this list, but it's one of the most financially significant, because unlike a cosmetic flaw, there's no way to simply paint over a broken furnace in January. And now we arrive at the discovery that ties every single one of these hidden problems together. The one that explains why so many homes end up failing inspection in the first place. It's simply this: homes are built by people, under time pressure, on tight budgets, often racing toward a deadline. And when speed becomes more important than precision, shortcuts happen. A crack gets covered instead of repaired. A permit gets skipped to save time. A vent gets left disconnected because nobody circled back to check it. None of these individual choices feel catastrophic in the moment, but layered together across an entire house, they create exactly the kind of hidden, compounding damage that inspectors spend their entire careers learning to detect. This is why a thorough inspection matters so much more than most buyers realize. It's not just a formality standing between an offer and a closing date. It's often the only thing standing between a family and a home that looks perfect, but is quietly falling apart behind the walls. The good news is that almost everything on this list is preventable, or at the very least catchable early enough to fix before it becomes a financial disaster. Proper grading around a foundation costs a fraction of structural repair. Sealing a roof properly costs far less than replacing rotted framing and remediating mold. Pulling a permit costs less than tearing out an entire unauthorized renovation to make it right. The pattern is the same every single time. Prevention is affordable, and neglect is what becomes catastrophic. So the next time you walk through a home, whether you're buying, renovating, or simply curious about the house you already live in, remember that the most dangerous problems are rarely the ones you can see. They're the ones hiding in crawl spaces, behind drywall, underneath shingles, and beneath the soil pressing quietly against a foundation wall. The homes that fail inspection aren't always the ones that look bad. Sometimes they're the ones that look perfect, right up until someone finally looks closely enough to find the truth. If this pulled back the curtain on what's really happening inside American homes, make sure you're subscribed, because next time, we're stepping inside a construction disaster that even seasoned contractors couldn't believe when they saw it, and you won't want to miss what they found.